Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back for another episode of Proof of Vision. Today we had a really good conversation with the co-founders of SEDA Network. We talked with Peter and Jasper, and it was a fantastic conversation. We talked about how they've always kind of seemingly been a couple steps ahead of where the puck is going in this space. First with oracles, then with kind of the verification of, cross-chain data is a big thing, I think on the horizon, and they've come up with some very, very, key, I think, innovations in that sector. And then we start talking about its implications with AI as well. So a little bit of everything in this episode for, lovers of DeFi, for Oracle lovers, for AI lovers and followers. So hope you enjoy the episode, and I will see you next time. All right. Welcome everybody back for another episode of Proof of Vision. Really, really excited to have these two gentlemen on today. We've got the two co-founders of SEDA Network here with us today. We got Peter and Jasper. Sirs, how are we doing?
Good. Yeah. It's a hot market heating up. It's been a year already. It's in the first month of crypto.
I know, it really feels that way, doesn't it? I'm already growing my beard out. I'm ready to go into the trenches. It takes me a while to grow this thing. So, I gotta cherish it while it lasts.
Same. I also heard the SEDA stash out again to, commemorate the trenches again.
That's right.
Doing well, Kirk. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So to kind of get the listeners off on a good start, I always like to start off talking about your origin story a little bit. Tell us how you got into crypto, maybe what you were doing before this, so we can get a good sense of your background. And then, what really was like the problem that you saw that made you want to found, SEDA Network at the end of the day. Peter, we'll go to you first, and then Jasper, we'll come right over to you.
Yeah, so I got started in 2017. So now it's a long time ago at this point. I started building everydApp.com, which was one of the first decentralized app stores in crypto. This was essentially aimed at solving the problem of UX for users. So like, how do users find applications? At that point, there was like MetaMask. Trust Wallet was sort of like the new, sort of wallet on the crowd, or sort of like on the scene, and attracting a bit of a crowd. We had sort of like minimal tooling. So I said, okay, how do I solve this for users? I want to explore dApps in a safe way and get exposed to crypto without losing all their money and losing their sanity. So I started that, and during that, I was looking for a co-founder to basically take over the tech, because I'm non-technical. So during this time, I was looking, at a lot of different hackathons and basically talking to a ton of technical people, and I ended up seeing Jasper's submission to a project he submitted for ETH Denver back in 2018. And I reached out via GitHub and said, hey, I'm looking for a co-founder. Do you want to meet up in Berlin in like a few weeks? So that's sort of like the start of our story. We hacked together for a weekend. And then about maybe a month later, Jasper and I moved to the same city. And that sort of began our journey working together up until COVID hit, when we sort of hunkered down for the long winter, right? So, sort of our evolution. So we went from this sort of decentralized app platform, but we said, okay, the timing isn't amazing here, right? We built sort of like this product that was sort of before its time, right? Like applications weren't ready for, sort of this curation that was coming, from what we were building. So we were sitting in a WeWork, and we said, okay, how do we, sort of get attention from Silicon Valley, which is across the world? We were based in Europe at the time. How do we sort of attract people to what we're building? And so as we were sitting in WeWork, we were like, okay, we're doing free gear, we're doing free food, like the offices are like free every single month, like something doesn't work here. So we said, how do we short WeWork? Like, that's how we can get some initial funding. Like, if we can short WeWork, then we can, make some money and bootstrap the company. So we ended up building one of the first apps for derivatives on startups, which basically let you go long or short on the value of a startup without having to own the underlying equity. And it was through this that we sort of started to look into tooling and infrastructure. So we started looking at, the oracles back then that were like Augur, Chainlink. We started building with DAI, which was very new at the time. The first sort of crypto native stablecoin. We started looking at 0x using trading engines, sort of off chain to make it cheaper. And we realized, okay, a lot of the infrastructure that we need doesn't really work properly on Ethereum. And so we started building, open market infrastructure and started trying to create our own stack to build a product, to basically trade. And while we were doing this, we started building this generalized oracle that would allow us to connect to API data and other types of data, in an off-chain environment. And while we were building this, we got a ton of outreach from founders saying, hey, we also would love, to use your oracle. And we said, well, actually, this is just kind of like, an internal thing that we're building. It's not going to be for, the public. It's sort of for our own internal use. And this is sort of what put us onto the idea of SEDA. So, we started to build oracle infrastructure, and we launched one of the first oracles on Near, Aurora, and Evmos. And this is sort of like our strategy. We said, okay, there's chains that are existing. We know that we're going into a modular future where there's going to be hundreds of networks, not just a few that have traction. What does this look like for builders? Like, the promised oracle that they're waiting for likely isn't going to come this cycle. Can we do something now? And can we sort of like get to traction really quickly? So fast forward a couple of weeks, we built a first party oracle. We launched it. And within about 8 weeks, we became the second largest oracle by TVL. So it was a huge sort of meteoric rise of TVL that really, made the team sleep under their desks, right, for a couple of months to make sure, things didn't break under the load. And while we were building this, we were going into the next bear market, right? So we saw the market environment. It was in our first bear market as builders. And we said, how will we kind of handle this? What should we spend our time doing? And so we said, what are the limitations of oracles today? And the biggest pieces are programmability. So these are sort of the three pillars that form SEDA. So we have programmability, we have accessibility, and we have permissionlessness. And so we wanted to build an oracle infrastructure that didn't have to be deployed on every single chain, but could be accessible from any network in a very simple way. And also was super customizable for developers so that they could build a oracle program that fit exactly their set of application specific needs. So this was what culminated in building SEDA. It's been about a year as we've been launching features on our DevNet, sort of testing out, different pieces of our network. And, we're getting ready to come up to our audit and our mainnet launch here soon. So that's sort of my background, how we got to SEDA and where we are now.
Awesome. So ETH Denver, right? That's coming up soon. So it's almost like the culmination of the origin story at ETH Denver, coming full circle here, right?
It was ETH Berlin. I don't think ETH Denver was there already in 2018.
Yeah, ETH Berlin. Yep, exactly.
ETH Berlin. Gotcha. So Jasper, give us a little bit about your origin story into crypto. Like, how did you start hacking around with things in crypto? Obviously, you met Peter, but what were you doing before that?
Yeah. So out of college, I started a data analytics company with two of my friends that I met in my first year. One of the large frustrations that I ran into over the 2 years of building that company was we built a lot on the Facebook APIs. And what Facebook kept doing was every 2 weeks, they would essentially change API access and change sort of like their API or whatever. So what ends up happening with like a small 3-person team is that everybody is constantly running around with tape, trying to fix things that keep breaking or hack around certain things that are now inaccessible, instead of being able to innovate on your product. And at the same time, I was also doing some small investments into crypto, like $10-20 here and there, as a support student / startup founder. And that money was like kind of growing a little bit. So on the side, I kept track of like, hey, what is this thing really? And then I started reading into Ethereum and smart contracts. I was like, hey, this seems like it's very interesting, and it might actually solve some of the problems that I run into as a third-party developer on top of sort of like centralized incumbents, right? The idea of smart contracts as immutable API interfaces that you can permissionlessly plug into was really interesting to me, because I saw the network effect that this could create by sort of like opening up the playing field for any third-party developer to come in and start building whatever they feel like on top of your network. And so I basically quit my job and took an internship with a company and said like, hey, I just want to do smart contracts. I'll do it for minimum pay. I just need to pay my I don't know, my groceries, and I'll build a small team. And so we built a small team of Solidity engineers within that company, did pretty well. And after 6 months, I left to do contract work and started working on Plasma, which was like the L2 scaling solution back in 2018, 2019. So yeah, got funded with a small research team and started doing that. And I think one of those products was being presented at ETH Berlin, where Peter and I met.
Pair Protocol is the first and only trading platform for narrative trading. Their technology unlocks the ability for anyone to pair trade. For example, if you think ETH will outperform Cardano, you can long ETH ADA in one click with leverage. Or perhaps you think Pepe will continue to outperform Doge. You can long Pepe Doge. Again, all in one transaction. The combinations are endless. Learn more at beta.pair.garden. Gotcha. Interesting. And I know, Peter, you touched on kind of where you guys thought, or where you developed, I guess, the early versions of SEDA. And it's interesting because you guys aren't the first set of founders that I've talked to that have kind of conveyed the same idea. They were working on like an entirely different problem, and then they realized that, the solution they had built for that problem was actually a solution in a business, for other people that had more PMF than maybe the original problem that they were building on in the first place. So it's really, really interesting, right? And so you guys are building kind of like this derivatives exchange, and then you built SEDA to support that, right? And then SEDA kind of became, the business that you continued with. Why did you make that decision? Was it just because you guys had so much inbound interest, for the SEDA tech stack? Because to me, the derivatives exchange actually has, I think back then, obviously it was a lot different, right? But obviously those have taken off now as well, right? So it's almost like you were early to that as well as being early to kind of like this Oracle game. So how, was it difficult to make that choice? To tell me a little bit more about that.
I think at the time it came pretty natural. I think that what we felt was that there were a lot of other people building in the sort of same problem space as the sort of derivatives exchange. And we felt like we were early on the trend of sort of like problems that you run into building multi-chain. Because we started to build on new chains and we were some of the earliest builders there. So we saw some of the lack of infrastructure or like scale, or the lack of scalability that sort of like existing infrastructure providers had. And I think this is really the thesis we wanted to double down on, right? Like not the idea of 10 chains or 100 chains, but the idea of like thousands to tens of thousands of chains in the future and trying to build products for sort of like that future that we envisioned. And that has been one of the best bets we've made. I think for sort of like being sort of like trend predicting. So core to SEDA's mission is to sort of like provide a consistent sort of like infrastructure experience across any L1 or L2, no matter if we deploy there, if you deploy there yourself, you're gonna get access to any data from anywhere, and no matter what sort of like virtual machine or whatever you build on, it's all completely agnostic.
Yeah, and I think another piece to add on here is that when we started building this infrastructure, like Jasper said, it wasn't that we thought there would be like 100 chains, there's gonna be thousands. And not just monolithic networks like Ethereum, but sort of application-specific networks. And we were sort of early into this thesis of, what happens if you build a network just for one specific application, right? Instead of having this be a generalized chain, like what if you have something like Hyperliquid, right, or DYDX chain, or the Uni chain that's coming out soon. When we made this sort of prediction back in 2020 and 2021, we said if this comes true, this will be one of the easiest ways to basically launch a go-to-market and have a very scalable product that has a ton of demand, while also sort of like betting that the space will grow in general, right? Because back in 2017, you had like 3,000 tokens. Now in 2025, already you have 36 million tokens. Back in 2017, you had like 10 chains, right? And I count like EOS and things like that. Cardano is like chains that, we'll say that they're real, right? And now you have, like over 1,000, different networks that are live today. Over 350 with TVL on them as well, that are sort of like getting some usage. So I think that, this general bet was like the infrastructure that was built back then was built for a mono-chain sort of like experience for developers, but it was not built to be, powering a future where you have networks that, expand past a handful, as an example.
Right. So it sounds like, you, like many people, believe in kind of the picks and shovels, thesis of investing, right? And this is like one of the easiest ways to kind of capture that future, which is very smart, right? Like, I mean, that's what I believe in too. I think we're all looking for, hence why I work for a research company, because my bet is that, hey, crypto is going to continue to grow, right? And the addressable market there is going to continue to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. So that definitely resonates with me. Jasper, if you could get into maybe, tell me what you guys think is the main competitive edge that you have against traditional oracles, right? Like, there's a lot of oracle providers that come to mind, Chainlink. I think Redstone's had a fantastic rise here, the last few years, with some of the yield-bearing asset support they've been able to carve out. There's things like Chronicle, some of these oracle providers, right? But like, what differentiates SEDA network from maybe like your traditional oracle model? Maybe we talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's two main ones that I'd like to touch on. The first one, just to hammer the point down, is the accessibility. You can access SEDA data from any chain without us having to launch there. You can launch a prover contract on your network that allows you to parse SEDA Oracle data without even having to talk to our team. And then secondarily, it's the programmability of the feeds. So the idea that even if you're the first person ever to need a certain data on your network, once again, you don't need to talk to us. You can just deploy a program that says, hey, fetch data from here, and aggregate it in a certain way, and immediately access it from anywhere. And that is quite unique. So if I launch, or I want to launch a new lending market on my network for a token that was just created, you can use SEDA to get that data. But you can also use it for completely different things. You can use it to query cross-chain state, right? So interoperability and verification. You can use it to bring RWAs on-chain. You can use it to track sentiment for certain artists on-chain and build derivatives around those. There's like, you can get really wild. Another thing we've seen is people use it to interact with LLMs and create fully agentic smart contracts that cannot be accessed by any private key, does not have any owner rights. It's literally completely owned by this model. And you can do that provably. And that is unique.
Yeah, I think, one of the things I know that you guys are kind of focused on right now is the verification bit. And I think another like futuristic bet that you guys made that maybe you identified early was this growing need for interoperability within crypto. The user experience has been shit. And obviously there's a lot of builders building to kind of fix that problem. So talk about that push a little bit. What is interoperability, like verification, and why is it so important as we move towards that future?
Yeah, I'll give a bit of a preface and then I'll hand it off to Jasper to talk about the product a bit more. So it's not live now, but we'll be announcing it while this podcast is getting ready to be released. So we are announcing the SEDA IVM, which is an interoperability verification module. And it's a product that we've built on top of SEDA that allows any operability protocol to prove chain state and verify chain state across any network. And so, sorry, can you guys hear that ambulance in the background? Okay. All right. Should I start that over so we cut that out? Up to you. All right, cool. Great. I'll cut part of the podcast as well. So we're launching the SEDA IVM, which is basically an interoperability verification module. And what this does, it allows any interoperability protocol to prove chain state across any network. So this allows a network to launch and basically have immediate decentralized permissionless access to any chain state. So why this is super important is today, in the sort of stack of the interoperability protocol or chain abstraction protocol, you typically have an oracle, or in some cases they're called a relay, which basically makes messages available on the other chain. And so with SEDA being able to be plugged in, we basically can offer any route. So anywhere that we support with our prover, We can support, a sort of bridge connection. We can support any token. And like Jasper said, if a token launches tomorrow on Solana and you want to be able to have that on Avalanche, this can be done with SEDA very easily. And so the sort of idea here is that you have a product that allows interoperability to scale in a secure and sort of horizontal way with liveness guarantees across any network. So that's what sort of our biggest bet with interoperability is today. And, why we sort of paid attention to this is, back a few years ago, back in 2022, interoperability volume was around 5 billion. It grew in the next year to about 40 billion, and last year is about 124 billion. It's still relatively small compared to like DEX volumes and stuff like that, but you can definitely see that the trend is there. It's a clear emerging sort of market that is becoming more important for networks, is becoming more important for users, and they want to essentially be able to interact with the network without having to always, sort of bring their assets from chain to chain. So this is why we sort of said, okay, this is going to be growing in 2025. Right now, it's projected that it'll be, between 250 to 500 billion over this year in terms of volume, so growing even more. And SEDA sort of sits at the bottom of that stack, powering interoperability protocols.
Jasper, was there anything you wanted to add on the product side of kind of ripping off of Peter?
I'd say that not necessarily. I think the thesis is like the more apps are gonna build their own chains, their own rollups. As that sort of like further fragments, liquidity also fragments. So the need for cross-chain messaging and verification just goes exponential with each new sort of like path or route that pops up. And we see that trend like accelerating, and we want to be there for it. So the idea that you can launch your own network and have a hyperlane or layer 0 instance deployed with that, and then using SEDA as a sort of like verification mechanism for the cross-chain messaging, like security mechanism, you can immediately become interoperable. It's like a huge like zone of security zone, as they call it, of other networks. And that's what we're targeting here.
Yeah, interesting. And I know, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, we all had a call and we were chatting about this a little bit. And I asked you guys like, hey, are you guys competing with layer 0 or with some of these interoperability protocols? And, I think the answer was it's more synergistic, right? So taking the hyperlane example a little bit further, Peter, like explain that a little bit more. Like what problem are you solving for hyperlane in terms of like what they were doing with their architecture and what they're gaining with the SEDA infrastructure?
Yes, I think it's good to step back a little bit as well and kind of describe the problem overall. You have this sort of stack, and Hyperlane is a great example of this because they've built sort of an open standard of modular Legos that can be plugged together to basically support interoperability to a chain. Part of the stack is how a message is relayed and verified, from an origin chain to a destination chain. This product looks very different in every interoperability protocol. So, on, let's say Hyperlane, you have the ISM, which is interchain security module. On layer 0, it's a DVM, it's a centralized verifier network. And you also have very different companies and profiles that are basically relaying this data. So, in layer 0 stack, as an example, they have Google, which is operating one of the DVMs. You also have something like Nethermind as an example as well. You kind of have like a sliding scale here, right? So you have on one side sort of a more centralized approach, which would then be like, Google as an example. And on the SEDA side, a more decentralized approach where you have a network that's actually handling the requests rather than a single entity. We believe that bridges, because of demand and because of network demand, have scaled in such a fast way that the relay services that exist today have worked well enough. However, they're sort of a stand-in solution. And so they're not really sort of end state. And so what we've done with SEDA is we've looked at this sort of problem with each of these stacks across these interoperability protocols and said, we can actually enter this market and build a universal solution that can be tweaked in different ways, but can plug in and make, sort of the verification and relay messages safer, and also, add in liveness guarantees. And so There's nothing more that an interop protocol hates more than downtime, right? So if user transactions just don't go through or are stuck or chain states haven't been finalized or whatever it may be. And they also hate, standing still. They want to move fast, right? They want to support new chains quickly. And so they also have to have these providers be able to scale and support these networks. And, that comes with its own host of problems with, making sure RPC feeds are available. How do we incentivize them? How do we make sure this is secure? What type of security and monitoring do they have set up? Where a lot of these things, by deploying them within a network that we have done, this product can now serve, these interoperability protocols and fill this missing sort of, piece of the market and create a wedge for us to basically make it more secure. So that's sort of the framing of why we've built this product.
So just to run that point home, what these messaging protocols are very good at is landing messages from chain A into chain B. And then they have this concept of programmable security where you can have sort of like, you can, as a developer, you can insert what sort of secondary verification method you would like to use. Today, we're seeing a lot of multi-sigs by centralized parties. And we are saying we can build sort of like a programmable, purely verification network for these projects. And that's how we see ourselves. So that helps us secure and expand the sort of like impact that the cross-chain messaging protocols can have.
Yeah, sorry, just to one point that came up, I thought it's good to mention, sort of in the evolution for SEDA as well. With SEDA, we have these products that we're building on top, right? So this IVM product that we're launching that, does state verification. This is sort of a product that's built on the SEDA network and uses the Oracle. But when you actually support, a new network with SEDA, once you deploy a prover there, you have access to any of these Oracle programs, right? So it could be price data, like Jasper said, or RWAs or sentiment or whatever you may want to have on chain. So, if you are a new network launching, sort of your stack, there's been a ton of talk on CT. I think that Andre from Sonic or Phantom, however you know him, or Wire, and whenever you came into the space, right? Basically, he's saying like, we as a chain have all of these infrastructure costs just to get going. So just to have an Oracle, we're paying like 5 million plus per year just for the Oracle, not including all the costs for interop and all of these other things. And so we're like, actually, with SEDA, you can actually plug in like a hyperlane or a layer 0 and have access to all these other, Oracle features with one, simple integration that takes us 30 minutes to deploy, rather than putting you in a waiting list for 6 months and asking you to give us, a huge amount of money that we can put you somewhere, at point, 15 on our priority list of chains that we're going to deploy to. So we've really kind of changed the market and said, no matter the data, no matter the token, no matter the network, no matter the protocol, they all have immediate, easy access. And so Jasper gave a talk at ETH Denver last year that was about basically, creating sort of the Ethereum of oracles. And this is a really important point here, is that SEDA isn't an application-specific oracle. As an example of an application-specific oracle, you could look at PIF as an example of this. They're very good at one type of data. With SEDA, we've built an open framework that allows developers to come in and create totally new programs that allow them to pull in, sort of data from anywhere. And so it's kind of a really different model than, the existing Oracle networks.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to point out too, like I think, you're talking about the DVMs and how they currently operate, a lot of them are on the multi-sigs. Like I think Stargate recently had some downtime as a result of like, some of the issues with their DVM network. So I guess the question becomes like, you guys have kind of created a new model for that problem, right? More decentralized, more scalable. Like, what do you think the deciding factor is going to be for like mass adoption of the SEDA network for these cross-chain providers? Like, is it cheaper for them to use the multi-sig setup than it is to maybe, decentralize? Because usually there's a trade-off, right? So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, what is the trade-off in your opinion that these interoperability protocols are going to have to make?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess like to start off, I think the main thing from our side as well is we want to be one of several products, right, that are doing security. I think that this design space is huge and it's going to come with a ton of demand, right? So ideally it's SEDA plus like Google and a couple other companies that are all competing in this market. So that's what I would like to see. I'd like to see like a healthy collection of companies that are going into this market. But I think also people haven't realized there's a market yet, right? So we're sort of a first mover here saying, hey, it's not just this tiny niche. You can actually make money doing this. You can make, a lot of revenue by being sort of an integral piece of this, sort of stack. And with us as a network, we're able to then, funnel this revenue into usage of our network and of our sort of products that are built on top. I think that, sort of the trade-offs when it comes to a lot of these interoperability protocols is they want to have something that is easy to integrate. So they don't want to change their stack in a big way. So when you take your existing bridge infrastructure and you make breaking changes to it, you're introducing risk, right? And so a lot of these protocols, risk is the number one thing. And if you look back into the data, of the 3 billion hacked over the past few years from crypto sort of ecosystem, 66% of that were bridge hacks, right? So, the Ronin bridge hack, I think it was over like 600 million, and the wormhole bridge hack that was like 325 million. They made up the biggest hacks in crypto, right? So we haven't had a bridge hack in a while, but when you look back in history, they're some of the biggest that there ever were. And these are a crucial piece of the infrastructure, right? So I think it's less of a trade-off and more that these bridges are looking for something that they can plug in that lowers the risk profile of their sort of underlying infrastructure, while sort of improving liveness and sort of uptime of these routes, and also doing that in a way that's scalable, right? So they don't want to say, this is available for 3 routes, and this is great because now Ethereum to Base to Avalanche, and Avalanche to whatever, like Polygon are now secure. They want to say, we have one shared security zone that this, sort of product is able to cover and ensure that there's like a decentralized, robust network. And then we can build in consensus that says, if like, let's say the SEDA checkpoint doesn't sort of, meet the standard, or if the other multi-sigs don't meet the standard, we can, cross out one of these outliers. So I think it's really about like introducing this as a secondary sort of benefit to your network, rather than sort of like a pro and con of like, okay, if we integrate SEDA, we have to delete the other DVN or the other ISN. It's more of developers want to use as many as possible, and ideally ones that, can kind of scale with them.
Gotcha. You brought up a good point too. And I think one you didn't mention, right, which wasn't really a hack, but it just highlights the centralization risk, right, was a multi-chain, and the whole fiasco there, right, is just, if you don't have decentralization at the bridge layer with some of this stuff, like it's a huge risk. It's a massive risk, right? And I think like Sam Kazemian, the founder of Frax, famously said, that like bridges are like the most dangerous, the most dangerous thing in DeFi, like the most dangerous thing in the crypto space. And so I think like figuring out like ways to like make those things safer, that's a huge unlock, right? Because interoperability needs to happen. It needs to happen as quickly as possible to fix all the fragmentation problems. And so like ways to make that safe, I think are going to be a good bet, for the future, right? That we're going to be living in soon. And so, maybe Jasper or Peter, whichever one wants to take it, like, what's the business model for SEDA then? Like, where are you guys capturing your fees? A lot of times, obviously, the strategy is to like charge no fees, especially at the proof of concept phase. But like, where do you guys see, SEDA being able to capitalize on the models that you guys have created?
Yeah, so our mission at SEDA is to create sort of the most open standards we can at the network level, right? So I think a lot of oracles today have a very opaque and sort of confusing business model, right? So they pay a data provider some amount with a Web2 contract, and then they make a protocol, sign a contract off-chain and pay some amount, and then they'll serve that data until that contract runs out. And when it runs out, no longer will we support this, right? We believe that this is like an interesting model, right? I don't doubt that it's profitable to do so. But we believe that in a sort of more long-term view of the infrastructure that's required to help this space grow, you're not going to be able to have companies that sort of push this sort of business and revenue model behind the scenes. You need to have this sort of an open standard. So, SEDA protocol and the network for now and hopefully for always, right? Unless there's some type of nation state attack where everyone in the world colludes against SEDA, hopefully the SEDA network is free, right? So just like Ethereum, there is no monetization, there's no extraction at the protocol and network level. I think that where we see the opportunity to, generate value in the future is around these different products that we're building on top of the network. So I would say that we can think about it in the same way as like, the Uniswap protocol is free and there's no fee to use it. If you go through the Uniswap interface or there's tools that they build, from the labs company, there might be a fee that they take. But sort of how we see it is that we want to make sure that either the, fee is as low as possible and just go for growth in the beginning, right? So I think that, we see definitely ways that we can monetize up the stack in the future. But in the beginning, we're just focused on getting this out there, getting as much traction as possible, and then, seeing different places where we can make value. I think that the most dangerous thing a protocol or network can do is insert sort of these hurdles that extract value in the very early days of the protocol before you truly understand what levers are going to be there to pull in the future. I think that, we could say, okay, 1% of all transaction fees, go to a dev wallet and that's our revenue, right? And some, some bridges do this, right? As an example, like there are bridges and that's their model. They take a fee on volume, which is sort of, the sort of traditional way to monetize a bridge. Sitting a little bit lower in that stack, we say, we could do that too. We could say, okay, check volume, parameter and volume, this many basis points taken out. But in the end, we just want to sort of see where this, plays out and basically build value on top of the protocol and sort of decide where we see traction.
Makes sense. Jasper, one of the things I wanted to ask about, like, how decentralized SEDA is, like how decentralized is it? Like how many nodes do you guys have across how many countries? Can you speak to that a little bit?
A little bit. So we have a Cosmos chain, which right now has like around 100 validators running it. I don't know where they're from, which is one of the proofs of decentralization and permissionlessness. I guess we did not. Yeah, you can just join a network basically, and then on top of that we have this other component which we call the overlay network, and the overlay network is the sort of cloud of nodes that actually does the querying and computing of the Oracle feeds, and that will be capped at launch, but will become completely uncapped in the next year or so. Where the idea is to have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of nodes actually be in charge of getting this data on chain. So it should become really, really decentralized. That is the goal. But first, we want to have some time to prove out the usability on the usability side, and then we can scale up the decentralization from there. So one way to see it is like you have like almost like agents or an overlay network on top of the Cosmos chain, and these are purely tasked with fetching data and reporting it back to the SEDA chain.
Vertex is a lightning-fast order book DEX offering spot, perpetuals, and money markets with unified cross-margin and a vertically integrated product suite. With Vertex Edge, users can tap into the power of shared cross-chain order book liquidity across Arbitrum, Blast, and Mantle, while earning trading rewards in VRTX, ARB, and MNT. Traders can access over 50 spot and perpetual markets alongside the GMCI 30 and meme indices, with low-fee trading and capital efficiency, all while preserving self-custody and on-chain settlement. Learn more at vertexprotocol.com. Gotcha. So you use the A word there, which is a trigger word for me, and I'm sure a lot of people, in this space is the agent, right? And I know you didn't mean it this way in that context, but I know you guys are building, right, for this kind of agentic future as well. I think you had, an integration recently with like Artemis. Talk about that a little bit. Like, how are you guys building the SEDA network to serve, the convergence of AI and crypto?
So one of the teams we work with, which has not been dropped yet, but they call their solvers agents. So one of the roles for agents within the SEDA network is actually data delivery to the destination chains. So you can have sort of like these agentic networks decide or learn where data is needed when and sort of like provide it there. Secondarily, a lot of the decentralized agents we're seeing today are just a private key on a server talking to ChatGPT, which is completely unprovable, and you don't know which transactions are actually issued by the agent versus the owner of the other owner of the private key or the server or script or whatever. So you don't have the agents don't have agency, or at least provable agency. And that's something that we want to work on, is sort of like this idea of smart contracts that are provably agent controlled, because the only thing triggering transactions on these smart contracts is verifiable decentralized Oracle feeds. So the idea that you can have an Oracle feed that plugs into your model or some third-party model that actually has provable control over a smart contract is something that excites us as well. And yeah, we hosted a hackathon with Particle a few months ago, and a lot of the use cases we saw built on SEDA were towards this direction. Actually, might have been a sign of the times, but it's also seems like there's demand.
Yeah, Peter, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think Jasper touched on sort of like how we can use AI in our network, but I think what he's talking about with this sort of chain abstraction sort of future with AI agents, I think that a lot of the, like, I guess call them like AI agents on Twitter today, right? That are like doing things most likely a human behind the scenes, right? But with SEDA, like you can think of SEDA as like a layer to connect any application on any blockchain to the internet, right? And this also means to any other type of AI model or LLM or whatever it may be under the hood. So I think that that's something that we're kind of severely underestimating, which is what happens when you can program a black box with parameters, connect it, permissionlessly, so you don't have a sort of single point of failure that's connecting it to the internet, and have that browse in real time, right, and be able to make on-chain decisions. So I gave like a very stupid use case that was like, basically set up a bot on Solana that uses like Twitter sentiment, and basically looks for contract addresses of like pump.fun tokens being posted, and if one matches like a political thing, right, like a Joe Biden token or whatever it may be, automatically buy it, right? And if in within 1 minute, like there haven't been 10 more tweets about it, then like sell the token, right? And then there's like and this is a dumb example, right? But like you can kind of see that from this example, like what could be possible with sort of on-chain strategies if you have the ability to connect, a AI agent with a crypto account that's funded, and have it really be actually plugged into the internet and to like AI models. So that's sort of like a faraway dream, right? Like probably a few years out from now, but kind of like where I see something interesting. I think Near has been sort of on the forefront of this with AI, with kind of creating a lot of these agents, and so I think particularly sort of like a collaboration there in the future could be interesting.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, and your idea was totally not as dumb as some of the shit that I've seen out there, for AI agents. So I would actually use that. So if you do develop that, let me know. Ping me, please. I'll send you my money. But I digress. Where does the SEDA token come into play for everything that you guys are building? All of kind of like these, these business sectors you guys are pursuing, for the network. Talk about the token a little bit, and what's the utility of the token, and where do you see that playing out in the future?
For sure. So the main purpose of the token is as a utility token to secure the network. So that's the number one reason to have a token, is for our proof of stake network. So that's paid for, gas fees, for transaction fees, to basically secure, the network. So as an Oracle, sort of value is how we're priced, right? And so, we have to look at sort of the value that we secure and ensure SEDA is able to kind of back that up with economic guarantees, right? So there's a whole economic crypto game you can play here, right? That many people have played with oracles for a long time. But with SEDA, we sort of see this as purely, the network needs to secure value. And so it needs to have something that can't be gamed, right? So as an example, if I have USDC, and I want to take control of the SEDA network. Let's say we use USDC as the token for staking. At some point, somebody can accumulate enough of this token, to then take over the network, right? So you have to have something that can, not only scale with demand, but also, have economic security as value rises within the network. So that's the first piece. The second piece is it's used, by solvers. So what Jasper's talking about, these sort of agents that are forwarding data requests from origin chains to say network and back, they use the token to pay for these transactions and pay for the computation that the SEDA network is doing. The overlay nodes, also this NPC network that Jasper mentioned, they're also staking the token. And that's sort of like kind of where the community can come in the future, right? So we're doing a phased rollout, mostly for optimization and speed. But in the future, with some, small amount of SEDA, you could run a overlay node on something as simple as like a Raspberry Pi and be able to secure the network and, do data requests for the network. And so there's sort of this future that we see where, we can involve a larger demographic of even like less technical people. Like in the future, one of our engineers, Franklin, wants to run this in a browser, like and make it as simple as, connecting your browser to the internet, going to a website with SEDA and being able to process overlay requests. So I think that, right now the main purpose of the token has just been to secure the underlying chain, but there's a ton of utility that is rolled out with this sort of, overlay network solvers and data request features that are going live over the next coming couple months. And so that's sort of where we see the token in general. I think that for us right now, some challenges is that we're a Cosmos chain, right? So it's a little bit more difficult to bring users to Cosmos. This is certainly improving, and a little bit of alpha teaser drop. It's probably one of the first IBM products that we'll build is a very, stable connection for the SEDA token to other chains as well. So that's sort of an overview of how we see the token and sort of the future for it.
Awesome. Jasper, any closing thoughts on that?
No, I think Peter summed it up well. It secures the network. You need it in order to deploy feeds on SEDA and access data. It's sort of like the underlying economic asset.
Yeah, Oracle tokens honestly are one of the most interesting to me. If you think about, all the tokens out there, like a lot of them are shit, obviously, but like from a utility perspective, it's one of like the only use cases in crypto for a token. And I think there's very few that actually have a growth ahead of them, a sustainable future. And so like these Oracle network tokens are actually very interesting from a utility perspective. And the fact that like there's always going to be demand for them, right? You're always going to need more.
Yeah. I think one important piece here to mention that like doesn't particularly relate to like our token specifically, but SEDA is really the first network as an Oracle that is doing all of the data requests and all these things in our network that you need a token to do so. If you look at, let's say, Chainlink as an example of this, all of their revenue, all of their deals are off chain. They're not doing anything through a network that their token is used in. This sort of V2 inflationary sort of reward thing that will maybe launch, right? It's been in the launch pipeline since like 2019. It doesn't actually have anything to do with the actual processing of data requests. And so I think SEDA is actually the first Oracle network that has its sort of business model on chain, right? Everything is deployed. So you have an Oracle program that's deployed in the network. You define the feeds. The feeds are paid for through the Oracle program. They're paid to data providers directly that, run data proxies and connect to the network. It's really the first on-chain sort of, way of powering an Oracle, basically.
Gotcha. No, it makes perfect sense. And this has been a great discussion, guys. This is probably a good place to wrap up. I think we've covered a lot. Obviously, for anybody listening to this, check our show notes. We're going to have links out to SEDA, and everywhere that you can find SEDA on social media, and how you guys can get involved with the SEDA network as things progress forward. Really, really fantastic, guys. It's been awesome to hear about your business model. And where, SEDA is going in the future, which it seems like you're always kind of 2 steps ahead of everybody and where the puck is going. So it's good to see. So we'll have to do it again sometime. So, really appreciate it. Have a good day, and we'll see everybody on the next episode of Proof of Vision. So take care.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having us. It was great to chat.